So now we're coming to the second practice in the centered awareness response, and this one's called standing in a river. Standing in the river is an imagery practice, and imagery is actually something that's really a beneficial practice to do. And the image that we're working with is actually standing in a river. We're imagining that we're standing in a river. Now, imagination is something a little bit different, because in imagination it's actually something that's disconnected from reality, from the moment. When we use imagery, it's meant to bring us more and more into the moment. In this case, more and more into our center. The 3 points we have here about standing in a river, the first one is that imagery creates a feeling sense. So as you work with the imagery, that feeling sense should be arising in the body. And if it's not arising, just kind of continue to just hang out with that image until you start to create a feeling sense. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. But imagery, no matter what kind of imagery you're doing, will create a feeling sense just as if you're having the actual experience. The second point is that standing in a river, the imagery of standing in a river, actually begins to channel the energy down. And remember, fear and reactions channel the energy up. We rise up. But this imagery creates kind of a descending energy that starts to channel downward. And the third point is that standing in the river, the practice of standing in the river will begin to create a relational ground, the ground of relational space. So the way that you relate to energy and objects and people in any kind of situation is actually something that's coming from the ground. As you channel down to the ground, the relation comes from the ground up rather than out of the ground. We're actually in the ground as we kind of relate with these different energies. Okay, so let's go to the practice. Great, so now we're going to move into our second practice in the centered awareness response, and this is the imagery practice of standing in a river. And remember, imagery can create that feeling sense in the body. So really, it's not imagination, because in imagination, in a way, we check out from reality, or we check out for what's happening in the moment, and we go somewhere in our mind. Imagery is something different. We take the image, we bring it into the present moment to create that feeling sense. And standing in a river is simply that. We take the image, we use our imagination that we're standing in the river and the current of the river is flowing towards us. As the current flows towards us, of course, it's going to push the center back. And since we're standing in water, it's going to make the center a little bit more buoyant as well. So naturally, the tendency is to come up and float away or go off with the current. But our job is to kind of stay in place and stand in the center with centered awareness response. So as the current comes up, I imagine the current is coming, I can feel it, and then I just step back into the current and creating a stable center. And I step forward, I feel. As it comes up, I step back, create descending energy, excuse me. And I stand as if I'm a large stone in the river where the water just hits me and moves around me. I move towards the river current, standing feet together, and then I go back. I move forward, I go back. I stand towards the river, the current's coming this way, I stand back. I bring my feet up, I stand back. And every movement, I imagine that I'm moving against the river, against the current's pushing me, and I move with it to go back. Forward and back. Forward and back. I can even imagine that the current is coming from behind and it moves me forward and then I move back into the current. It pushes me forward, I hold center and I move back into the current. It pushes me from behind, I step forward, turn, and I move back in this direction. I can even move forward and then forward into the current. I can even practice the currents coming this way and I turn and I'm standing in the river. There's many different ways that you can practice standing in the river as if the current is either coming from the front or coming from behind. And my job is simply to hold center and to create this kind of feeling of descending energy and centered awareness response. And remember, in our body, the center, awareness is obviously the center of our mind, the center of awareness, but in the body, the center is here. And this creates the foundation of all types of physical interaction, relational space. Creating that center awareness response in this exercise of standing in the river can help create a descending energy moment by moment by moment. Great. So welcome back. And I just want to kind of remind you, the standing in the river, we had these 3 points. Remember, imagery creates a feeling sense, number 1. Number 2, energy channels the energy down. Standing in a river helps to create this descending energy. And the 3rd point that comes from the practice of standing in the river is that it creates a relational ground.